Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Mohab Riskala, and I wanted to speak to you guys regarding the recent agreement by the American Dental Association and the National Association of Dental Plans on the proposed framework to be adopted that has been adopted by NCOIL. As you know, you probably know my name because I am the author of Massachusetts Question 2, and I'm proud to say that we installed in Massachusetts a law now known as MGL 176X, which I believed would become the framework for this country's oral health benefits plans. And now it turns out that the NCOIL agreement appears it's going to be the new framework. I want to share my screen and explain to you what the problem is with this new framework. To begin with, I want you to understand what NCOIL is. NCOIL is the National Council of Insurance Legislators, and I won't get into the details, but just look at the first line underneath that name. Sound public policy in 50 states for 50 plus years. They're making policy for every state. Okay, now we have a policy in Massachusetts for medical loss ratio, and everybody understands the importance of medical loss ratio at this point, so I won't belabor that point. But the question now is, what does that framework, now that they've adopted this framework for 49 other states, what's going to happen in 49 other states and possibly even happen in Massachusetts gradually to weaken Massachusetts? Beyond the history, I really want you to understand this NCOIL agreement from the perspective of the National Association of Dental Plans. So who's the National Association of Dental Plans? That is Delta Dental, MetLife, Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're an association that is represented, kind of like all the states are represented by the ADA. National Association of Dental Plans is the ADA for dental insurance plans, okay? So NADP, this person, Lauren Oakley, is the Associate Director of Communications and Technology, as you can see at the bottom of who? The National Association of Dental Plans, okay? And what is she saying here? She's saying NADP and ADA achieve loss ratio compromise on NCOIL. So they're saying we compromised. So compromise means that they gain something, they lose something, we gain something, we lose something. I'm going to show you we gained nothing. We lost so much, okay? The model legislation is what they're describing here. We now have model legislation. Well, that's funny because I thought we had model legislation in Massachusetts until now. Offers middle ground solutions, middle ground solutions. Okay, so what they're saying is you're not up here anymore, you're somewhere here. Okay. And then what does it say at the bottom? It's attacking Massachusetts directly. It says, let me just look at the highlight, but even before the highlight, it says at least 5 states have adopted loss ratio reporting or outlier remediation based on the existing state dental market. So it's saying states have already got reporting, so that's already there, okay? The NCOIL model legislation takes a similar approach. Okay, so the new approach in NCOIL does the same thing as what is already existing in 5 states. Okay, one state, and then they attack Massachusetts. One state, Massachusetts, arbitrarily set a loss ratio. Arbitrarily, it was not arbitrary. I have data to support why we picked our number of 83%, and in fact, why that 83% should go up to 88% over the next 5 years. They said, Massachusetts, what's her word? Arbitrarily set a loss ratio for dental plans at the same level that exists for medical plans that operate on a completely different scale and delivery model. Yes, they are on a different delivery model. How about the fact that they have no caps in terms of catastrophic harm to the patient, whereas dental insurance have caps, $1,000, $2,000, $2,500. They have maximums. It is a completely different model, and that's why medical loss ratio or dental loss ratio should be higher than its corresponding health plan percentages. But that's just an aside. This unfortunate approach, she said and goes on to say, has forced 5 dental plans to withdraw from the small employer insurance market in the state. For those who don't know, let me just dismiss that statement, okay? All of those dental plans that left are insurance plans, are life insurance plans, rather. Life insurance plans. Now, life insurance plans have loss ratios of about 15%. They are the most spoiled groups of insurers. So they left the small group market, only the small group market, not the large group market, not the mid market, just the small group market. And that percentage of what actually is a void is a fraction of 1%. And when I say a fraction of 1%, I'm saying 15% of 1%. Okay, so that's small, it's infinitesimal. And new insurers have come into Massachusetts and are saying, we will pick that up just like that. And we are so happy that Massachusetts did this because now we can compete with excellent medical loss ratio. What company said that? Benecare. Benecare is coming to Massachusetts just because of question 2, because now they can distinguish themselves as a high medical loss ratio company. So what I've just done is I've just shown you that NADP, okay, is bragging about this agreement, and they're saying in their own brag, you didn't get anything, states, in terms of reporting, because 5 states already have it. We take the similar approach. So anybody who's saying that they got something in terms of reporting, NADP is saying, no, you didn't. And that's obvious to me, okay, as the person who spent years developing a dental loss ratio for Massachusetts. I know this. You got nothing, okay? But again, you don't have to take my word for it. Take their word for it. They told you this, okay? But I want to actually now go into, really the thesis I have for today is not to be complaining. It's actually to be remediating. I want you to know why NCOIL is a problem. I want to begin with, did we even have, I'm going to come off share here for a second. I want to go with, did we even have an agreement that they're calling an NCOIL agreement with the ADA and NADP? I would say, from what I've heard so far, we don't even have an agreement. That we have a tacit agreement, not a real agreement. Why? Well, because here I am holding a binder of all of the ADA bylaws, okay? From what I understand, this was not voted on by the ADA Board of Trustees, okay? From what I understand, certain staffers, I won't name any names because I'm not looking to lay blame, certain staffers have been negotiating with the NADP on this NCOIL agreement for the past year, and they've kind of kept this quiet, close to the vest. They haven't been talking to the right people. So recently, about a week ago, they had an emergency meeting with the Council on Government Affairs, and they said, here's an agreement we're doing. We want you to know about it. Council on Government Affairs, from what I understand, said, well, we would like to make some modifications. And they were told, no, you can't. The agreement's done. Case closed at Council of Government Affairs. The same thing happened at the Council of Dental Practice Benefits. Here's what we have. You have no option to change it. Must be accepted. Okay. I heard the Board of Trustees were informed of this, but they never voted on this. Well, now hold on a second. If they never voted on this, and the bylaws would require that they would have voted on this, okay, and all parliamentary procedure would have said that they would have had to have voted on this for this to have gone out, because the ADA bylaws require parliamentary procedures to be followed. All parliamentary procedure books would say there was no vote, there was no agreement. Okay, so have we agreed on it? I would say, if what I'm hearing actually happened, there is no agreement, and we are not required to be bound to an agreement. And my point would be, I want to exit this agreement promptly. Okay, but then I want to go into, beyond the fact that I don't believe we have an agreement, I want to go into, what did we gain if we had an agreement, or why would we sign this agreement? And for that, I'm going to go back to my share screen. Look at NADP's language. This is another post, another press release by NADP. Look at what they're saying happened here, okay? This is their summary, okay? Over the past several weeks, NADP and ADA have continued discussions on the NCOIL loss ratio model. This weekend, NADP and ADA reached an agreement on model language. This was a week ago, okay? This happened last week. First thing they point to is incurred claims are being defined by CFR 158.140. Now, CFR 158 is basically the enforcing regulation behind the Affordable Care Act. And they're saying, great, we got the Affordable Care Act. Okay, we were actually trying to avoid a lot of the language in the Affordable Care Act in Massachusetts, and we did avoid a lot of that. Here they're saying Affordable Care Act controls, yippee. And then they say nonprofit community expenditures. This is line 2. Why are they saying this? They know why they're saying this. I'm not sure if anybody else knows, but I do. I know why they're saying this. Nonprofit community expenditures, there we can follow 45 CFR 158.162C. What does that mean? It means what they're saying in their lingo, because they know their language. They know what they're saying. They're saying, we just adopted a massive loophole. That's what they're saying to each other. They know what that means. I'm telling you what it means. And I'll show you in a moment what it means. But then they go further, right? Then they talk about reporting dental loss ratios, outlier remediation, section 5. We're going to go to section 5. We're going to look at it together. Section 5, what are they saying? An outlier is subject to remediation if they are one standard deviation from the mean dental loss ratio, one standard deviation from the mean. So what they're saying is take all of the insurers, and where are they doing it? They're saying in a market segment. This is relevant where it says in a market segment here, okay? They're saying in every market segment, so if an insurer has a small market, a mid market, a large market, they're saying dividing out just the market segment, okay, you compare that market segment for Delta Dental against that against all of the averages of MetLife, Blue Cross, Guardian, all of them. Okay, average them all together. Just look at that single market segment, small, mid, large, and define an outlier as someone who's one standard deviation from that mean dental loss ratio. Now, if you were to go online and just do a quick statistical analysis of what happens if you take a standard deviation, if you calculate a standard deviation for a small group of population, so large N, okay, but few, 10 people in 10 plans in that population. If you look at the relationship where you have a very small number of figures that you're averaging and putting a standard deviation on, the smaller the number, the wider standard deviation. If you have a million of them, the net standard deviation tightens. If you have only a few, which is what dental insurance is an oligopoly. It's just a few providers of insurance, okay? When you have a very small number, what happens is that the curve flattens, widens. That's what happens, okay? So one standard deviation in a sample of, say, 10 players in the market, one standard deviation is massive, okay? It leaves so much space for them to be deviant from an average. But even if they weren't deviant from an average, let's say that they were actually right on the average of what? The average of a bunch of players who want the lowest number, okay? That's what they're trying to do, okay? So why would you take an average of people who are basically price setting to be at 65% medical loss ratio? Why would you do this, right? And so what they're saying is an outlier subject to remediation if they're one standard deviation from the mean dental loss ratio. This also includes a threshold of 3% points below the mean. I won't get into that, but it's just another bonus for them. If a carrier is considered an outlier for 2 consecutive reporting years, 2 years, if they're an outlier, meaning one standard deviation for 2 years, and they say what? In a market segment, they will be subject to a minimum dental loss ratio. So what they're saying is, yay, we got this. They're talking to each other saying, we got this. They'll be so they don't have to be just an outlier 1 year. They have to be an outlier 2 years. Wow, what a give. A minimum dental loss ratio cannot take effect until at least 42 months after the carrier is first defined as an outlier. So again, what's the title of this section that we're going to go and look at? Outlier remediation. What's the remediation? If they're outliers for more than 2 years, which means they're a standard deviation outside, which is crazy, okay? Then once they're defined as an outlier, which is 2 years later from being an outlier, a minimum DLR cannot take effect. You can't apply a dental loss ratio to them for 42 more months. So it's 2 years plus, after you figure out they're an outlier, they get 42 months. What's 42 months? 3.5 years. Okay, so 2 years plus 3.5 years, 5.5 years. They are not subject to any remediation for 5.5 years. So back to my question, which is my thesis. What did we gain? Okay, we didn't gain reporting. We looked at that already. What we gained is a 5.5 year control. Wow. What else do they say? This is a significant step in our engagement with loss ratio issues. Oh, it is. It is. They should be popping quarts of champagne. So what we've seen so far is we've seen one press release where they're saying, one state, Massachusetts, arbitrarily set a loss ratio on a completely different scale. This is unfortunate approach has forced 5 dental plans to withdraw. They're saying, don't look at Massachusetts. We have a new framework. And then they're saying in their next press release, and that framework is a significant step in our engagement with loss ratios. They are saying they won, they won, they won. And at the same time as they're saying you got nothing. Okay. Now let's move into different codes. Okay. If you look at 42 USC 300 GG 18, what this is basically is the part of the Affordable Care Act. Okay. And that Affordable Care Act is managed, for those who don't know, that Affordable Care Act is managed by different state and federal agencies. What makes them really happy in the agreement that they signed is that by pointing to, they have indirectly pointed to 42 USC 300 GG 18. How have they done that? They've done that because all of the language in the agreement that that we have signed is going to be referring, and I'll show you in a moment, it's referring to chapter 158. So chapter 158, all of this is chapter 158, and we're going to go through it in a few moments here. Part 158, issuer use of premium revenue reporting and rebate requirements. And where does it get authority? It gets authority from 42 USC 300 GG 18. That's the one I just showed you. Okay, this is it. 42 USC 300 GG 18, and it controls that this is a USC, it's a statute, and CFR is a regulation. So the highest law in the country is a federal statute, and it is enforced by a set of regulations. 42 USC statute, 158 regs. So continuing to look at this, what controls CFR? You may not know this, but one of the biggest things that we were fighting against in Massachusetts was making sure that broker commissions are included in the medical loss ratio. Why is that important? Because if your patient is paying 100% of their premium, and broker commissions represent somewhere between 5 and 20% of commissions, 5 and 20%, okay? That means they're starting, just as a cost structure, they're starting at an 80 cents on the dollar, because they've given 20 cents to the broker, okay? So what we did is we didn't point to CFR, we avoided CFR so that exemptions that would allow an insurance company to hide what they paid to the broker, because they want to pay the broker a lot so that they get the most market share they can. Those exemptions are avoided in the medical loss ratio in Massachusetts. They are not avoided in the NCOIL agreement. Let me show you why. Because the NCOIL agreement refers to CFR 158 CFR. This is the Center for Medicaid Services, Medicare and Medicaid Services. Okay, this is a rule that has been applied to what? To 145 CFR 158.130. Okay, now what's that mean? It means that as we go through the NCOIL agreement, you're going to see this 158, and you're going to say, oh, if you want to know the rules, just go to 158. No. The rules are not all in 158. You can read 158 on its surface, but you don't know what the exemptions are because they're not in 158. They're controlled in rules outside of 158. I'm going to show you one. It's a big one, okay? So Center of Medicaid Services has a rule. The purpose of this bulletin is to provide guidance regarding MLR reporting purposes, which exclude agent and broker fees or commissions from earned premiums under 45 CFR 158.130. What are they saying? They're saying you don't have to calculate in your medical loss ratio broker fees and agents. Okay, and how do you get there? They tell you. If all of the following 7 conditions are met, an issuer, meaning a dental insurance company, may exclude these agent or broker fees and commissions from premiums. And what are the rules? They're actually very easy to avoid, and that's what they do. They avoid health plans in this country, avoid broker fees this way, controlled by Center of Medicaid Services. Now, you may ask yourself, as an aside, why is Medicaid controlling private insurance? I have said this repeatedly in different public forums. If you think Medicaid is something that you don't have to pay attention to, you're wrong. Medicaid controls private insurance in many ways that nobody knows. Okay, I know it. I've been saying it. We have to get Medicaid into compliance with what we need as a dental organization. Otherwise, they're controlling us, even if you don't take Medicaid. Here's one of the ways. So what's the exclusion say? You have to meet these 7 points. Okay, point 1, the law of the state in which the policy is citused does not deem the agent or broker to be a representative of the issuer. Most states don't do this. Most states do this, so that's not a problem, okay? The policyholder is not required to utilize an agent or broker, okay? Nobody does require them to use an agent or broker, okay, to purchase insurance, and may purchase a policy directly from the issuer. There's no rule that says they can't, except that the issuer will not do it. Why? Because the issuer wants the broker, okay? They want to protect the broker because the broker's giving them the best deals, okay? The policyholder selects, retains, and contracts with the agent or broker on his or her own accord. Okay, so you're a buyer, whether you're a business or whatnot, you are going and you're finding insurance. Okay, that's what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. How else are you finding this insurance company? It's on your own accord. You're contacting a broker. Let's say you're a big company and you're saying, I want to buy insurance for my staff. okay? Or even a small company. How are you getting it? You're contacting a broker. It's exactly what you're doing. Number 4, the policyholder negotiates and is responsible for the fee or commission separate and apart from the premium. This is a real tricky one because are they negotiating it? They're being told this is your fee. This is the standard fee for the industry, and they just accept it, right? They don't know. No one's arguing saying, "I'd like to negotiate that fee." Do you think it's negotiable? It's not. The agency's going to go, "That's my fee," and then the negotiation goes like this. Well, okay. They have no choice, right? So is it negotiated? It's accepted. That's a form of negotiation, right? The issuer does not include these agents or broker commissions and fees in rate filings. This is good for the insurer, okay? In Massachusetts, we require the medical loss ratio for the upcoming year to be something that the insurer files, and it has to be approved by the insurance, by the Division of Insurance in our state. That means what they're just saying, number 5 helps them because it says the broker and commissions are not included. So they show it, it makes them look like they have an inflated medical loss ratio. They're basically saying, and you trick the Division of Insurance, number 5. If you trick the Division of Insurance, then you don't have to include it. Well, that's great. That benefits them, okay? The policyholder voluntarily chooses to pass the fee or commission through the issuer and is not required to do so. Okay, so the policyholder is the patient, right? Chooses to pass the fee or commission through the issuer and is not required to do so. What they're saying is, you can pay it with your premium if you choose to do that. Now, how does the policyholder make that decision? Do you say, hey, as a patient, would you like this to be paid separately as a commission, or would you just like to pay it with your premium? What do you think they're going to say? They're going to say, I'll just pay it with my premium. Is that a choice? So they've chosen to pass the fee or commission through the issuer being the dental plan, but isn't required to do so. Which one would you like? It doesn't matter, really, to me. It's easier if I just write one check, okay? So they're going to pick number 6, check, met the 6th exclusion point, okay? And number 7, the policy issuer issues the 1099 to the agent or broker if a 1099 is required, okay? So does the policyholder issue a 1099? They don't. Why? It's not required. Okay, you don't have to issue a 1099. You don't have to issue a 1099 to anyone if you don't want to. Okay, the person who wants the 1099 is actually the receiver, right? They want to be able to say, these are my numbers. These are accurate from what I've received and what I've paid. Okay, but there's no requirement that anyone has to give them a 1099, and they're not going to give them a 1099. Why? Because they're just writing it off as an expense under their premium. It's simpler for them from a tax perspective. Why would you want to say, oh, this is the premium I paid to this, and this is the premium I paid to this, right? You can just do it in one shot, and boom, you've expensed it. Okay, you don't need it. You don't need to do it in 2 pieces. So effectively, this 1 through 7 makes it so that you are able, as an insurance plan, you're able to take all of your broker fees and take it out of your medical loss ratio. So now you have an inflated medical loss ratio because that broker fee has become a pass-through to the patient. That's in the NCOIL agreement. It's allowed. Why? Because, as it shows here, CMS is saying, if you follow 45 CFR 158, you can do that. Okay, their rule applies to CFR 158. Now, this is CFR 158, and it's really long, and I'm not going to go through all of this. But what I would like to show you is I would like to show you Eric Montlock. Eric Montlock's email to the Division of Insurance in this state in October, this past October, when we were negotiating or trying to convince the state to follow us in certain things. I want to show you what Eric Montlock pointed to. Eric Montlock, who is he? He's the CEO and president of Delta Dental of Massachusetts, okay, right now. And he writes this long letter, but I want to point a couple of things. I want to read it out to you because I'm going to get back to it in a moment. He wrote, I want the Division of Insurance, to ensure the definition of quality improvement activities is broad and reflects, I want you to keep that word in your mind, reflects its medical equivalent where? In 45 CFR 158.150. What's he pointing to? 158. He wants that broad language, right? He goes on to say, the current draft definition, which was the framework that we wanted to set for the country, the current draft definition that's question 2, might limit dental carriers from offering meaningful quality improvement activities prevalent in the medical market, and then he describes them. Okay, meaningful quality improvement activities. Quality improvement activities, also known as QIA, are a well-known loophole for insurance companies. In fact, there have been so many legal battles on this where insurance companies use these quality improvement activities effectively as marketing. Okay, so and we'll get to more detail on this, but I want you to remember the word is broad and reflects, not defines, reflects its medical equivalent 45 CFR. I want the division to ensure the definition, because I defined it, okay, of quality improvement activities is broad and reflects its medical equivalent 45 CFR. He uses that word. I'll show you why that's so important when you look at the NCOIL agreement. And he uses it again. Broaden the definition of QIA to include activities that are not defined, reflected in 45 CFR 158.150. Okay. Now, I want to now go into specific comments that I have, and I'm going to start to tie a lot of what I've just said together. Okay. This is the NCOIL agreement, the ADA and the National Association of Dental Plans supposedly agreed to. And I want to start with section 2, purpose. Purpose of this act is to provide for transparency of the expenditure of dental health care plan premiums and to require annual reports and remediation if the dental loss ratio falls below a certain percentage. Okay, that's the words. Okay, but what's really happening here? I'm going to tell you the purpose. MZR, that's me. MZR1, this act has only 2 real purposes. 1, to avoid the legislation written into Massachusetts Question 2 becoming national. And 2, to make the DLR legislation meaningless. That's what they're trying to do. Really make it so that, yeah, you have a DLR, it gets you number, right? Our ADA stewardship should have shown this to me. I would have loved to have seen this because this NCOIL agreement castrates DLR nationally. I'm going to get into the details now. First of all, they get into definitions. This is section 3. And they're saying dental loss ratio, or DLR, means percentage of premium dollars spent on patient care as calculated pursuant to subsection I in this section. And I wrote, this calculation is basically going to follow the Affordable Care Act based on section 3D II below section, and then and I point to a particular section below, which I'll show you, where they put some good language in there, and then they killed that language at the same time, okay? So that I think the ADA saw, yeah, this is good, but they just kind of missed that they eliminated it after they put it in. I'll show it to you in a moment. They then say that incurrent claims are going to be defined as 45 CFR 158.140, and that is actually fine, okay? These are very limited definitions. And then they go into the denominator. So now we're in section, we're talking about dental loss ratio. What does it mean, dental loss ratio? They're saying the dental loss ratio is calculated, divided to the numerator by the denominator. But then they go into section 1B. The denominator is the total amount of premium revenue, excluding federal and state taxes, licensing, and regulatory fees paid, nonprofit community expenditures as defined in 45 CFR 158.162C. And my comment is, this CFR reference incentivizes giving patient money, private patient money, to government agencies or other tax-exempt organizations, incentivizing a cozy relationship, conflict of interest, and creating programs that have the carrier's logo on it as a form of marketing and brand recognition. This is marketing, okay? This is a form of quality improvement activities that they're allowed to do if they're following 45 CFR 158.162. Let's go to that for a second. So 158.162. Here we are at 162. And specifically, it was 162C, community benefit expenditures. Community benefits and expenditures means expenditures for activities or programs that seek to achieve the objectives of improving access to health services, enhancing public health, and relief of government burden. This includes any of the following activities that, number one, are available broadly to the public and serve low-income consumers. What does that mean? It means they can give out toothbrushes with their logo on it, okay? That's a form of marketing, but it is relabeled to be what? A community benefit expenditure, okay? So they can take money out of their premiums and basically turn it into a community benefit expenditure with Delta Dental on it. That's what they can do. And then it has another exception. Otherwise would become the responsibility of the government. So they're saying you can pay for things that the government would otherwise pay for, like toothbrushes, okay? If you can save the government money, you can use private patient monies, but not just government or any other tax-exempt organization. Okay, let me tell you about a tax-exempt organization, okay? In 2019, Delta Dental of Massachusetts contributed to a tax-exempt organization, which happened to be their mother company, Catalyst Institute, okay? They contributed $291 million to Catalyst Institute, a tax-exempt organization. $291 million to Catalyst the same year in 2019, where they only paid $177 million for patient care, okay? How much did they give to Catalyst in 2018? $335 million. How much did they pay for patient care? $185 million that year. So what this is saying basically is there's a big loophole here, okay? And that's in our NCOIL agreement. Let's go back to the comments. Then it goes down and says the commissioner shall define by rule, which I loved when I saw this. Okay, commissioner define by rule expenditures for clinical dental services. That's good. They're leaving it to the commissioner. And then they say activities that improve dental care quality. Great. So that's QIAs. They're basically saying we are able to define it at the state level. Great. Okay, it's not going to follow CFR. Okay, it's not going to follow federal loopholes. Okay, that we know that are existing. Okay, and then it says something weird. Okay, activities conducted by an insurer intended to improve dental care quality, meaning QIA, that's just, reference to quality improvement activities, shall not exceed 5% of net premium revenue. Whoa, 5%? And I wrote here, the historical QIA standard set on this has been under the NAIC, meaning National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which is 0.8%, okay? And even that is considered high, as shown in a recent litigation called Columbus versus Trump litigation, where the judge determined that 0.8 is not allowed. Okay, they have to meet certain specific standards, and you can't, and even 0.8 is not allowed. Okay, then let's move on here. So we went to 5%. I don't understand why we did this, right? We should not be up at that high at all. Okay, we should be trying to keep that as low as possible, even lower than medical. 3, overhead administrative cost expenditures. Again, I wrote this is fine. I have no problem with the idea. I just don't like this line about 5%. I have no problem with the commissioner being able to define something, but then something else happens as you read further. Section 2, the definitions promulgated by rule pursuant to this section, meaning all of these definitions that we just said were fine if they're defined at the state level, but not federal, must be consistent with similar definitions that are used for the reporting of medical loss ratios by carriers offering health benefit plans in the state. Wow, that's a problem. And I wrote, this is terrible. This negates above. Basically, where you're saying on the one hand that the state commissioner can define something, you're then taking it away from them and saying, no, you can't, because you must be consistent with what? Similar definitions that are controlling health benefit plans. Well, what are the definitions in every state that control health benefit plans? Federal. They're CFR, okay? They're CFR or USC, they are controlling them. All of those state plans are controlled by federal law. So on the one hand, they're saying, we'll give you this, but on the other hand, saying, took it back, okay? So this is terrible. This negates above. It indirectly is referencing ACA definitions, Affordable Care Act definitions, which must override 3DB1A above, so all these things above, and will make commissions a pass-through to patients. See what just happened there? Now you're going back to the CMS 7 points that you can just pass it through, and now it's an exemption because you're following CFR, and CMS controls CFR. Okay, CFR, 45 CFR. Commissions range from 5 to 25%, and they have no limitation. Okay, so now what happened here is Section 2 just negated what's above it, and that's why I set up here this calculated number, dental loss ratio, spent on patients as calculated pursuant to subsection I in this section. What you're really saying is this calculation is basically going to follow the Affordable Care Act because that 3DI below negated what was above it. It's going to now follow federal law, okay? I know this is complex, okay, but I really want you to try to understand what I'm saying here is that what we just did is we basically are saying you get all your loopholes, NADP, that's why they're celebrating, okay? We didn't give that to them in Massachusetts, okay? Section 4, transparency of patient premium expenditures. Transparency, great, okay? What did we read when we looked at their press releases? They're saying 5 states already have transparency and we pretty much follow that. Oh, okay. So what'd you give us? Nothing. How hard is it for us to get transparency in every state? It's easy. Every time a state goes to try to get a medical loss ratio percentage, you know what they end up with is a transparency bill. Getting a transparency bill is piece of cake. Okay. So what are they saying? They're saying if you're going to use transparency, use a form called CMS 10418. This is a very detailed form. It's a good form. I have no problem with it. I wrote this is fine for baseline reporting. Then they say report additional data that includes the number of enrollees, the planned cost sharing, deductible amounts, the annual maximum coverage, and the number of enrollees who met or exceed the annual coverage limit. This is good. No problem. I have no problem with this. Why? Because we already have it. Great. You want to give us more of the same? Great. We got it. Wonderful. Then they say the DLR reporting year shall be for the fiscal year during which dental coverage is provided by the plan. All terms used in the DLR annual reporting shall have the same meaning as used in the Federal Public Health Act, Part 158, commencing with 158.101. Wait a minute. Okay. My first read on this and my first comments on this, I missed it until I had more time to sit down and read the details of it. My problem is that parenthetical, commencing with 158.101, okay? My initial thought is this is not a big deal. Okay, it's fine, okay? But then I read commencing with 158.101, and look at my note now. The fact that this commences with 158.101 is a subtle loophole since definitions are technically in 158.103. Let me pause you, okay? We're gonna go back to CFR and look at 158.101. 158.101 is the beginning. It starts with 158, the whole thing. Basically what they're saying is any definition in all of 158.101 is it becomes controlling. Now, what's interesting is that's not the definition section. The definition section is 158.103, and it has specific definitions like what's a policyholder, what's a small employer, okay, this is a small section, okay? My initial read was, okay, they're gonna use 158 definitions, that's fine. But then I read it more and it says, no, not just the definition section. Beginning with 158.101, that's not definitions. Wait a minute. So what you're saying is that anything in the entire part 158 that could be referred to or reflected, remember what he used? Remember the word he used? He used the word, Eric Monologue, he used the word reflected, okay? Broaden the definition of QIA to include activities that are what? Not defined, reflected in 45 CFR. Now, again, you go back to my comment, and I realize that what they're saying is, don't just look at the definition, look at any language that's reflected, okay? And so I wrote that. This parenthetical allows loose interpretation of what a definition is, okay? They're saying we're going to use the definitions. We're going to use the terms used in the DLR shall have the same meaning as used. The terms used shall have the same meanings, okay? They've redefined definitions to be more than definitions. It's basically the way it's used, reflected, okay? So for example, I wrote, for example, QIAs described or reflected anywhere in part 158. Remember, QIAs are a big loophole, quality improvement activities, abused for the last 10 years in health plans and protected against in the Massachusetts Question 2 initiative, okay? QIAs described or reflected anywhere in part 158 can be used as a definition, okay? This seemingly innocuous parenthetical should be removed and replaced with limited to 158.103. Why? Because that's where the definitions are, okay? This is subtle. This is subtle gameplay, okay? But they've outwitted us with that parenthetical. It looks, just you're glazing over it. And I glazed over it initially first as well. But that's why I read things 10 times. Okay, and I really understand them. That parenthetical has to be removed. It cannot be commencing with 158.101. It has to be limited to 158.103. And then they have this part where it's available to the public in a searchable format on public website. Again, this is good. This is all just normal reporting. Okay, and then you get to Section 5. I cannot even express to you what Section 5 is. Section 5 is excess revenue and rebate. Basically, what they're saying is, when are you out of compliance with your minimum medical loss ratio? Or they're basically saying, how do you even define a minimum medical loss ratio? So in Massachusetts, we're at an 83% medical loss ratio with commissions not included in the 83%. It's included in the 17%. Okay, that's what we're doing. That makes it basically, our medical loss ratio is basically more like 88% because of the fact that we have commissions on their side of the number, okay? But I wrote, Section 5 is designed to protect even the worst plans. It makes a DLR meaningless, okay? Now, our leaders at the ADA have sort of taken on this label that basically this NCOIL agreement is a floor, meaning we're gonna go up from here, okay? But we've established something. And the reason they are saying we needed this is because it benefits us to have the states more speedily get a dental loss ratio in their state. So you speedily run into a wall is what you're doing here. Okay, you are racing to a meaningless dental loss ratio by having this NCOIL agreement. Let's go through what they've laid out here. They're saying using an aggregate data for 3 years. Okay, so that means your dental loss ratio is aggregate data for 3 years. The commissioner shall calculate an average dental ratio for each market segment using an aggregate data for 3 years. So it means if you're out of compliance for 1 year, doesn't matter. We're gonna not look at it because we're gonna look at the average. Okay, newer experience shall be subject to reporting standards as CFR 158.121. I can't go into all of the details of that, but basically it does not control anything at that location. The commissioner shall calculate an average dental loss ratio for each market segment using the data pursuant to subsection 5A. One standard deviation of the identifying as outliers dental plans that fall outside one standard deviation of the average dental loss ratio. So what they're saying is your minimum dental loss ratio for your state, for any state outside of Massachusetts, to start with, we're going to make the framework to be your minimum is one standard deviation below the average. Okay, and we know what the average is. With the average is them colluding and saying, let's be at 65%. Why? They don't even have to collude because that's where it tends to be, about 65, 70%. Okay, and you get to be one standard deviation away. How many percentage points is that? 20? Okay, so that means you're an outlier. 70%. You're an outlier at 50%. Okay, and you're good. If you're at 51%, you're fine. Okay, so there's really no control in that with one standard deviation. So I wrote this is terrible. The MZR 18, my specific words are, this is ridiculous since it allows the insurers to protect each other by all having a low MLR, and one standard deviation mathematically is going to be very large due to few insurers being averaged. Statistically, standard deviation is larger when the number N of insurance being averaged is few. One standard deviation used in this way is not identifying problems, it is actually disregarding problems. MZR 19. I'm referring to this section here where a carrier shall not be considered an outlier if its DLR in a market segment, again, it's only looking at DLRs by market segment, not their average DLR, is within 3 percentage points of the average dental loss ratio. My note is this is insignificant given the destructive impact of Section 5 as a whole, but does set a future precedent for states adopting only parts of Section 5. This could become a freebie 3% leeway space below the state set DLR. So let's say you were to apply this language to Massachusetts, okay? We have an 83% medical loss ratio, okay? They could say, oh, but based on the NCOIL framework, we're going to give them a leeway of 3%. So if they don't hit 83%, we're going to forgive them if they get 80%. Why? Because they don't need to have full compliance. They are, as long as they have substantial compliance, and they're 3% within it, we accept that, okay? So are they required to have full compliance? They're supposed to have substantial compliance. This is a substantial compliance section is what they're basically introducing here. And why? Why even put that in there, right? Why do you think they put that there? They're putting that there because they're seeding the future. Here's why they're doing it, okay? It looks innocuous, it's not. These are cunning. Insurance companies are far more cunning than we are, believe me. Okay, moving to the next section. The commissioner shall investigate those carriers that report a DLR lower than one standard deviation, including ordering such carriers to rebate. Okay, so the one standard deviation is easily evadable, is my note here. So what if he's looking at it? Okay, those guys don't have to work hard to comply. They can be robbing the bank and they're in compliance. Okay, including ordering such carriers to rebate. And I just say, so what? You're talking about carriers that can easily comply. This is a low standard for them to meet to avoid it. Then it goes further. It says, if the DLR for a carrier in a market segment does not increase, meaning after 2 years, okay, it does not increase and remains an outlier as defined in subsection B after 2 consecutive years. So they got caught 1 year underneath that one standard deviation, which I think is ridiculous if they got there. But they're saying here, you can do it for 2 years. Okay, we'll give you even a second year in leeway space. Barring unique circumstances as determined reasonable by the commissioner, the carrier then shall be subject to a minimum DLR percentage by market segment. Okay, so minimum DLR percentage. But you see what it said there? It said by market segment. The evaluation, and what I wrote here is, the one standard deviation is easily evadable by a carrier applying a 2-year grace period, essentially invites a poor MLR. And then my next comment is the evaluation is by market segment. That means a carrier can fail market segment A in year 1 and say, oh yeah, we screwed that up, and fix it in year 2. Okay, at the same time as they go to a different segment. So small market, they fail, their average is low, but they bring their average down by failing market segment, small market, okay? Then next year, they bring up small market, but they drop down mid-market or large market, okay? They can, by market segment, start playing this sort of, this game of changing their numbers so that they're always low in one market to keep their overall aggregate low, but they comply and they're never deemed an outlier in that case. Therefore, even in this terrible Section 5 framework I wrote, all markets should be held to a DLR minimum if any market fails, okay? And that's what it should be. All markets should be required to comply. Moving further here. MZR 24. It gets even worse, okay? Then they say, if you got caught 2 years in a row in the same market, which is like impossible, okay? Then we will hold you to a DLR minimum. We'll make you a DLR minimum. The commissioner shall promulgate rules establishing the DLR percentage based on, at minimum, the average existing carrier loss ratio by market segment. Okay, so they're saying we will then average all the markets in that small market, mid-market, large market. And we will say that's your new DLR average. That's your minimum now. You have to meet the what? The average, okay, which is what? It's like they're trying to get a low average, all of them, okay? They're saying you've got to meet that average, okay? By what? By market segment, not by all your segments. So that same year as you're being held to that average, you can drop a segment, okay? And just be lower on that and compensate. Great, yeah, no problem, we'll do it. But it gets even better. It to be effective no sooner than when? 42 months after a carrier is determined to be an outlier. So when do they determine to be an outlier? They're determined to be an outlier at the end of year 2, okay? They get 42 months. That's 3.5 years. 3.5 years before that supposed minimum dental loss ratio is effective. So what have they done? They've effectively gotten a 2 plus 3.5, they've gotten a 5.5-year freedom of non-compliance. Now, what do you do at 5.5 years? At 5.5 years, you change the name of your company. If you got caught on that, you just change the name of your company. You say, I'm Delta Dental of Massachusetts too, okay? And now, boom, boom, I'm out. I've got a new plan, right? So I wrote here, 3.5 years after is when the carrier is given a DLR percentage, which means that they have 2 years to violate an easily avoidable 1 standard deviation requirement, then also 3.5 years to delay being forced to comply with meeting the average MLR, which equals 5.5 years of being under 1 standard deviation. Therefore, all of Section 5 is designed to protect even the worst plans, while bad plans just meeting the 1 standard deviation requirement can continue to flirt with the 1 standard deviation line. Section 5, excess revenue and rebate, therefore, is a terrible framework. And what did this framework do? I'm going to come off my share here. Okay, what did this framework do? This framework replaced the framework of Massachusetts that was really designed, and I wrote the framework, and you've heard me say this in public forums. I wrote the framework of question 2 to be the framework for the nation. And rushing to try to get all of these states to get a medical loss ratio is not necessary. Okay, the Massachusetts question 2 reporting is so robust that they sued me in the Supreme Judicial Court of this state on how robust it is. Okay, let me tell you about it. Section 2 of MGL 176X, which is the law now for question 2, it's MGL 176X. Section 2 requires them to report their dental information. Section 3 requires them to report everything else that they cover, vision, everything. They have to show it. Why? Because that way they can't cost shift and say, oh, we're going to put more weight into, because I expect 17% to actually go more to 12%. My plan was always to bring them higher over time. And how was I going to do that? I was going to show that they don't need, these are not-for-profit companies. Delta Dental is a not-for-profit company. They don't need 17%. They could do this on less than 10%. I have data of Delta Dental's own data showing that they can manage a $600 million plan for $40 million. Okay, that's just over 5%. Okay, I have their data. Okay, I've litigated against them for years. I have their data. I have their own data. Okay, so when they say that our numbers are arbitrary, our numbers are not arbitrary. Okay, 17% was our starting point. I was planning to raise it. Because Section 2 gave me the reporting of their insurance, and Section 3 gave me the reporting of everything else. And I knew what they were going to do was they were going to try to load marketing and other administrative costs into their insurance section to make it look like they have no room at 17%, that they need all that 17%. And I've made it so that they can't do that movement. I can see it. Okay. And if I can see it, that means I can say, no, you got to move that back to there. Actually, you're at less than 10% in terms of your administrative costs. Therefore, to take that to legislators and say, I want to increase the medical loss ratio for dental insurance companies. That was always my plan. So my point here is that the reporting coming out of Massachusetts, it was always designed to free the nation. What we got in this NCOIL agreement, according to our ADA commenters, at the ADA, is, oh, hey, but we got reporting. No, you had reporting. You had reporting. You had the most robust reporting coming out of Massachusetts. Give me 2 years, okay? But not only do you have that reporting, the NADP has told you they've got just 5 other states with reporting. Okay, how much reporting do you need? Okay, what did you gain? What you got is redundancy. You didn't win anything. So, the reason I'm having this conversation is not to complain. Okay, the reason I'm having this conversation is to say to our trustees, 1, I don't believe there is an agreement. Okay, I believe it's time for you to say, actually, we did not have an opportunity to review this and vote on it. There is no agreement. Rescind it. Okay. And then number 2, go back to the drawing board and say, NCOIL, we need more time. And we would like to retract that and redesign an agreement that actually is good for the nation, or we will refuse to participate in an NCOIL agreement and simply say, let's keep watching Massachusetts question 2. I wish you all well. I hope that we can get past this thing efficiently without any harm to our wonderful ADA. I think the ADA has the ability, if properly steered, to be the most powerful rocket ship to launch dentistry into a new revolutionary age of health and service to our patients at the same time as motivating doctors so that they are all the hard work that they are going into their educations and cost going into their educations is balanced, and we're not just gears in a dental insurance machine. Have a great day.